I feel like I do.
Somebody moved me around to Dee's place.
Imagine that.
Well, I scared Travis half to death.
Travis will have to come in and make his way.
Around.
Well, I'll tell you what, I'll move
We
down.
should make him do the wave. Elbow. That's
We
what
know
happens
they'll be
when you're last.
I sent him an email after that, said, are you gonna be at the meeting tomorrow? Because at that point in time, I had scheduled a lunch meeting with Mike Rose. I thought, uh-oh, I know there's no way that when he and I get to talking, that we're gonna come to make a 2 o'clock meeting. So he texted me back and said that he wasn't feeling good anyway, so I just canceled mine and his meeting.
Mac wasn't feeling well.
I let Travis off the hook, but I didn't tell him. Well, yes, I did. I sent him back to go. So my conflict was handled. I know that.
How did you take Probst's long editorial yesterday?
That one I haven't read yet.
I haven't read it yet. What was it about? I need to, can I plug in my charger?
Absolutely.
Is this the New World Order thing?
Oh, shoot.
Is this where he talks about the New World Order?
Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't read that yet.
See if it,
I've got-
actually, here, I can
It
do
just
here.
rambled on, and usually it's stuff short.
Well, I have a personal habit
Well,
of,
it's nice.
late at night, I decide what the length of the article is before I decide what the content is.
So, but-
Because I will,
Actually jack in the ears.
Yes, and so, anyway, I
I
gotta
haven't
charge
read it
that
yet.
because my phone's about to die. I've got kids going to Keysville for baseball and one here and one sick and Kyle's out of town. So never a dull moment.
how was it? Were you just absent to the meeting where you got put up? for
Appointed
this?
appointed to everything. Yes, no. Add it to the plate. So.
Well, I admire you. Once upon a time, I did that.
I
When it
figured
when
do
it
it
started
while I
costing me
can.
financially, it's kind of like,
Yeah, no, I figure do it when I can. So
Who's this one?
this one says this too shall pass. So growing up, my mom used to always say, this too shall pass, this too shall pass. And so I got that.
that's
never take it off.
important if you can remember it.
That's what my mom
Yeah.
said too.
Really?
Mhm.
Yeah,
And kill the kindness.
I had killed them kind. Well, that's funny because my other one says be kind. You want me to share this with you?
Right, so
I think be kind sounds a little better than killing with kindness.
So those are my little things. So, but I never take them off.
see, there's a difference. See, you're from, where are you from?
Plano.
See, my mom's from like El Campo. They're like Southern women there. They're like knives and stuff like that.
I grew up Southern. Well, my whole dad's side of the family is Harlingen, so we would go
See,
down
completely different
there.
culture.
Yeah, a whole different deal, but we spent most of our time, I was born down there. How are you?
There you are.
How are you? Can you sit here?
Certainly.
You can sit wherever you want.
Oh, thank you.
Rockport's like a really good mix because it's like where the tortilla, beans and tortilla meets the crawfish. You know, you get like good cultures.
That might be a good book. Yeah, I can see that.
One of the best things I've heard in recent memory was, this is the Southern woman charm.
Mhm.
You can say anything about anybody you want if you follow it up with.
Bless your heart. That is true.
Isn't that nice?
It is
Isn't
true.
that nice?
Bless her heart, she. My grandmother used to always say that too.
She can't help it.
Mm-mm. Bless her heart. So, how are you? Good. Good.
So you got notified? We didn't forget you this
Yes,
time?
I did. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Yay. In advance, everything's good.
I told him to send it to you twice just to make sure.
No, thank you.
I think the first school board meeting after getting sworn in,
Mhm.
I showed up a half hour late.
Oh, yeah.
Because
It was at the,
what was it, the old administration building, and I just had it in my mind that it was a 6:30 meeting like always. And for whatever
So do I need to
reason,
sign in if I'd like to speak? It says to be heard, or is it
Um,
informal? It says I need to do a sign-in sheet.
Yeah,
I'll state my name and stuff.
we rarely have one, but yeah, you can sign the back of
Main thing is we have a
The
record that
chairman,
you get.
yeah.
something.
Actually sign, why don't you just sign in with, like, just on a piece of paper? Today's date.
We also have, because there's a possibility somebody signing on Zoom, you check that as well.
I'm gonna sign it.
I can validate it, and then,
It's fine.
right, you just sign it.
Oh, Travis has to stand.
Anymore. No, he's
No,
not
he's
bad.
not
I
bad.
kind of wanted to sit there and then I like hiding in the corner.
Are you Baptist, Francis?
Huh?
Are you Baptist?
Oh, yeah, Southern.
Back on Baptist?
Back row. Once on Wednesdays, twice on Sundays. So we grew up.
That's right.
Grew up that way.
My kids just go Wednesday though.
Okay, we can start now.
We were gonna make you do
Yeah, you're
that.
Mine's ahead
of table?
You're the head of the table. Jack didn't want it.
Actually, you're at the foot of the table.
I'd rather you phrase it that way. Excellent.
We still have by my watch about 3 minutes.
You do. I want that to be in the record.
Does the chairman
Mine
have the
says two.
resolutions, or are you gonna hand them at the appropriate time?
He has them in his sack.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay, make sure I brought my stack from here. Yeah.
2 resolutions.
I got 'em.
And then the minutes.
So there should be 3 things total for you to sign.
And once you sign them, we'll
And then the
take them.
secretary has to sign it as well.
Yeah, I'm just thinking, because we had a discussion about the secretary being here, not being here, what happens if not.
I mean, but that was supposed to be, I
Yeah.
think, voting on that today or whatever. No?
Can't now.
That was the idea.
Yeah, the purpose was, if we had to have you here, either for a forum or to sign documents, and you weren't, we need a assistant secretary position. And we didn't have it on the agenda last time any more than we have it on the agenda now. So
That's right.
you're here, so
I'm here.
we're safe, but.
Yeah.
Sarah,
Write it down.
Next.
time.
next time's agenda,
Got it.
please.
Do you want to do?
My goal is to be here
your
by
vice
chairman
chairman
last
also,
week
because
of
it was
December.
last time.
Not a good time for me to have a meeting.
I think that's a good idea, because if I'm not here, I never was today,
Yeah,
so
that
I
December
I think
and
that's a good
January,
idea.
the
Just
last
put
week,
those two
especially last week of
on
December,
the
last week
agenda.
of January, or I'm in the office or I'm running to the bank.
Yeah.
Nonstop all day.
Okay, Jack.
Okay. I call this meeting to order. I notice that there is a quorum present. And I have time is now 2:00. We need, okay, we call to order, done the quorum. Item number 2 is consideration action on the minutes of February 15th meeting. Don't everybody speak at once. Yeah.
Okay, so I move to accept the minutes from the February 15th meeting.
Okay, is there any discussion on the minutes? Otherwise, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Okay, the minutes are approved. And now we move to item number 3, which is citizens to be heard. Mr. Hutt is here. We'll check the monitor in a moment, see if there's anybody from the outside.
Quickly. I think it's pretty evident with like what's happening around the state, that the appraisal districts probably have about another 10-year run, and we're gonna be at something that's much different, that this system is not gonna last. And there's gonna be a lot of changes, and we're probably gonna go to a sales tax type based economy. And it looks like that's where it's happening. It'd be nice to see our appraisal district kind of recognize that and get ahead of that and work with those in our state legislature who are pushing for this. I know Mr. Hunter is looking into this. There's other people that are doing that. And that's just on one thing. The second thing I'd like to say is that next year that you guys who are the appraisal district, I believe that you can set,
That's me only.
the appraisal board,
The board of directors?
the board of directors, that's what I mean, the board of directors can set some sort of criteria that when we come through protest and that when we, certain things that the appraisal district does that can make the system a little bit more fair and more balanced on the side of on the citizen. And these are just a couple of suggestions that I would like to see. That when somebody protests for their property, they are provided a evidence packet without having to ask for it. It's an automatic thing. There's a lot of people who came up here who didn't have one. That when they bring that evidence packet and they have a hearing with the appraisal review board, the only evidence that can be used against them is the evidence that has been presented. You can't go outside and use because they're not prepared for that and they're not professionals. All tax homeowners should be informed if there's any change made to a descriptor within their property. And this would mean that if your pool went from a pool 1 to a pool 3, you would automatically get a notice letting you know that there was a change. And that all categories have to need a descriptor. People need to know the difference between a pool 1 and a pool 2 and a pool 3 so that they can go and they can look at it. And when it comes time to a property, if you're assessing my property on the appraisal, it seems unfair to me that if you're assessing me against an over 65-year-old, because those folks aren't likely to protest. Whereas if that's where my property is compared to, of course their property is going to be high because they're going to take the increase every time. Or it's more likely. My dad's not that type of person. And that when you come in, that your evidence packet, you're not one of the properties that's being the evidence against you is not a property that is currently being under protest itself. And I think there's some things that I can write this up, but there's things that the board of directors can do to make the process a little bit more fair and balanced. And it's not the district's fault that it's not, or it's nobody's fault that I'm just saying, I think these are things that can make the system a little bit better and a little bit easier for everybody. That's it. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Who's saying,
I'm sorry.
do we have anybody from the outside?
Let me check. I'll check.
Yeah.
That's fine. I just see one participant. It's us. Yeah. There's nobody else.
So yeah, nobody from the outside.
There's no more.
No.
Okay, I will
No more
close
Yeah.
item number 3 from citizens to be heard and move forward with item number 4, which is consideration of possible action of a resolution adopting rule authorizing chief appraiser to remove property from a taxing unit appraisal roll and delete taxing unit from district's appraisal roll under Texas Rural Tax Code section 25.25B. You might, as you talk about that, tell us the incident that caused this to come up.
So,
Please do.
as you know, the taxing unit change had to do specifically with the taxing unit city of Aransas passed. In the year of 2019, they did an annexation. They didn't jump through, apparently from the subsequent lawsuit and the loss of the lawsuit. They didn't do it in the right way. As a result, there was a lawsuit against them. The citizens prevailed against the city. And there was an order to go through and remove those people from that taxing unit authority. It's not real clear in the code how you can do this without a direct reaching out from the city of Aransas Pass to indicate that they want that done in a supplement. The supplement is basically, again, if you'll remember in years past when I've talked about a supplement, it's basically a scroll, and I put my seal on it and I hand it to the ARB. The ARB listens to protests, and at the end of the year, a roll is certified. It's really the seal. A certified roll can then be undone, and you can add supplements in it. What is a supplement? You can add exemptions. You can take away property. You can agree with the property owner that garage wasn't there on the day of or whatever. You can do what's called joint motions to correct, or property owner motions to correct, or chief appraiser motions to correct. It's all just a fancy way of saying you can change the roll, but for specific reasons. When it comes to a taxing unit, it's very specific. It's done by board rule, and it has to be done by both boards. meaning the ARB has to agree and you have to agree that this can be done. So essentially what this is doing is allowing me to exercise 2525B under the tax code to actually remove the taxing units for the years of 2020 and 2021 for those properties that should not have been annexed, and as a result of that lawsuit was designated. That's it.
Instant, Jeff, one of the things that I would tell you, since we're away from that, and I can kind of speak to just the general nature of it, the appraisal board has no oversight authority with respect to the appraisal review board. Did you know that?
Yes.
Okay, that, the consideration for the action of what I would need is a motion to that effect.
So moved.
Wait a second.
Second.
Okay. All those in favor, please say aye. Wait, excuse me, is there any discussion beyond the motion? Second.
Well, will the chief appraiser have to certify to give, I'm sorry.
Okay. Actually, I'll be nice, but you can't address the board once we're through that. What was your question? And we'll allow it in and we'll, so you know.
Because you spoke to, because I was asking, will he have to recertify it with the
It's called a supplement.
appraisal board?
It's a supplement to the appraisal rule. That's what I generally just described.
Right, I know what you did, but does the appraisal, do the other guys have to certify it or not at all?
Who's the other guy?
The appraisal review board.
They already did.
Okay,
Yeah, they did so in a previous week.
okay, that's all you.
And I addressed that in my, I said that both board by board rule. I said
Okay.
that.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Okay. We're good to move on to, wait, that's a signature item for me, is it not?
Yeah.
So,
Signature and secretary, chairman.
yeah,
Yeah.
I have one, and I know not to leave the room without, with it.
7th, today's the 7th.
Don't you sign my spot.
Thought about it.
You said.
Okay, item number 5, consideration of and possible action regarding Aransas County Treasurer's 2021 audit by Mr. Smith.
Distribute these now. Copies of the audit, the financial audit of 2021. I will tell you, I brought you need another copy. Okay. Mr. Streely, since his close, he was unfortunate, he couldn't be here anymore, but I told him he had to retire and to go fishing. So hopefully he's on a boat today doing something like that. In light of that, the presentation may be a little different than what you're used to, just because my style may be a little different from his. We're still going to go through the highlights, go through some information we think is pertinent to what we're doing, and then we'll go forward. All right, so as we begin, just right inside the table of contents, you will see the independent auditor's report. And it tells you that we have audited the accompanying financial statements of Aransas County Appraisal District as of and for the year ended December 31, which includes your financial statements. And our responsibility is to express an opinion of these financial statements based on your audit, on our audit. We conduct our audits in accordance with auditing standards generally accepted in the United States of America and the standards applicable to financial audits contained in government auditing standards issued by the Controller General. So just highlights, an audit involves performing procedures to obtain audit evidence about the amounts and disclosures in the financial statements. We believe that the audit evidence that we have obtained is sufficient and appropriate to provide a basis for our opinion. On the second page, you will see at the top that in our opinion, the financial statements referred to above present fairly in all material respects the respective financial position of Aransas County Appraisal District as of December 31, 2021, and the changes in financial position for the year then ended in conformity with county principles generally accepted in the United States. Just a few other matters to discuss. The accounting principles require that management's discussion and schedule of the district's net pension liability and schedule of contributions identified as required supplementary information in the table of contents be presented to supplement the basic financial statements. Such information is required by the Governmental Accounting Standards Board, who considers it to be an essential part of financial reporting. We have applied certain limited procedures to that required supplementary information in accordance with the standards generally accepted in the USA. We do not express an opinion or provide any assurance on the information simply because the limited procedures do not provide us with sufficient evidence to express an opinion or provide any assurance. That is on supplemental information. That is not part of your audit. So we go over to page number 3 and we look at the management's discussion analysis, and we'll just go over some highlights here. Financial highlights to be specific. The assets of the district exceeded its liabilities at the close of 2021 by $1.1 million. Of this amount, $490,000 considered unrestricted net position can be used to meet the district's ongoing obligations to property owners and creditors. Fund balance of the district at the close of 2021 totaled $762,000. Of that amount, $95,000 is considered unassigned, and that may be used to meet the district's ongoing obligations to property owners and creditors. District's fund balance decreased for the year by $26,000. And the district has compensated absences of $44,188 at December 31. And we'll go into that a little more detail as we go through. If you will, turn over to page number 5. Just to highlight the unrestricted category of net assets with a balance of $490,000 at year end can again be used to meet the district's ongoing obligations. And you will see that $490,000 at the bottom of the first column in the 2021 column down at the bottom where it says $490,000. So just to point that out to you. Let's turn over to page number 7. There's a little bit of discussion about these balances. So you have different balances, and one of them is a committed fund balance. That represents amounts that can only be used for a specific purpose because of a formal action by the district's governing body. So this is something that you set. And that breakdown is listed below. All of them are identical to the prior year except the 3-month operating budget. And that's going to move based on different information that happens through the year and the expenses. So the 3-month operating budget last year was $261,000. This year it's $274,000, which brings your total committed fund balance to $656,913. Going down a little further on page 7. Yes, sir.
Before you get too far along, let me ask you a question.
Yes, sir.
Do you want to go through the presentation before we ask questions, or as we get to a certain page, you want to take them in, or what's your preference?
We can take questions as we go, if that's fine.
Okay, let's back up to page 6. Page 6.
Okay.
We skipped that one.
Well, we glossed over. I want to be sure that I understand what I think. If I look at expenses and I see the personnel services was 207,726 more than the prior year. And what I remember those items to be substantially was we hired a new person. We hired a person early when somebody was retiring. That was a nominal expense, but it would have gone into personnel. And does the bulk of the difference here, other than those two things, was that for retirement expense paid out at retirement, not the retirement expense, vacation, sick leave, et cetera?
Okay. So this is based on governmental activities. So it's not your normal operating budget. So when you think of an operating budget, those are the expenses and revenue that you control. Yeah, they're part of your budget. They're part of your payroll. They're part of things like this. When you get into governmental, you start talking about things like net pension liabilities, things that are controlled outside of this board, things you can't control, like the fluctuation and balances of your pension liabilities, your deferred inflows and outflows. And so the fact that it's governmental, while it may have some portion of what you're talking about with payroll, may have increases and decreases due to staff changes, raises, things like that, it also has a large injection from the deferred pension liabilities that are controlled by your outside pension. I believe that's the name of it escapes me at this moment, but it is related to your outside net pension liabilities, which did increase this year, and you'll see those a little further. We will address them, but while it does include part of the personnel services you're discussing, it also includes, based on it's the fact that it's a governmental activity.
Yes.
It is part of the pension liabilities as well.
Well, I guess what I was looking for, Michael, how much was personnel expense specifically for a new hire and hire before the end of the year so that they can be trained? And what's the percentage of that we can say was?
I don't have that in front of me, but it was Taryn came on, I want to say at early December or late.
Nominal expense?
It was, yeah, it was a couple of $1,000s.
So is the bulk of this related to the retirement account?
It is, and if you go to page 38, I will jump ahead real quick, just to
Okay.
give you a highlight to kind of help maybe answer these questions for you. It's kind of the last page in the packet, actually. And it goes over a schedule of expenses based more on the operating rather than on the governmental. And so if you look at the top two lines on the personnel services, you can see there true salaries and employee expenses of $682,000 for 2021 compared to $602,000 for 2020. So that's going to be, that change is going to be what you're talking about more in the personnel line. The rest of it's going to be related to the pension, the net pension liabilities, deferred inflows and outflows that are controlled through the third party.
And to answer, further answer your question, I want to say that there was probably 2,000 or 3,000 associated with Karen coming on early, but then there was the person that retired, there was some accrued time that had to be paid for. I think it was 6,000 or something to that effect, if I remember right.
And that will show up on the last page, but this is primarily
This is primarily the
pension.
right.
And the only way I, in my key brain is able to understand this is we can't do anything about it.
That's exactly right.
Okay.
And to your point, when Jeffrey was doing this and when he showed me this page, that was one of the very first times I said, whoa, what is this? And he was like, no, these are rates, these are pension rates on future things that you can't control and you can't control.
Right.
All right, so we actually knew the number. I mean, we discussed it already because it was highlighted right away. But unfortunately, when we look at these things and when we look at governmental numbers, one of the reasons we don't stress a lot about those governmental numbers is because they're numbers you can't control. When we talk about, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, so then my question becomes, how do you prepare for the next year on that? Because if you're having a $200,000 increase, is that gonna happen? Does that happen every 5 years? Does that, I mean, that's a large increase.
Yeah, the thing to kind of think about here, and I know it's hard to wrap your hands around, but these are not true income items or expense items, these are asset items. So when we look at this is a change in net assets, and I realize it says revenues and expenses, but it's not actually hitting your bottom line. Okay, your contributions are what are hitting your bottom line. These are projected liabilities that could go, last year they actually went down and about 120,000. This year they went back up. That's just a moving target that happens based on changes in interest rates, changes on personnel, changes on that. You really can't, for the fact of cash outflow, it's not going to affect that. It's not a liability that you're going to pay this year. It's simply a net asset moving target that we have to put into your balance sheet because of the government requirements.
Do you recall what the school districts?
Yes,
numbers
this is
were?
what I feel like.
And this is my opinion, and it's not the opinion of being a board member. This is the state of Texas shifting responsibility on its balance sheet to the entities that roll up to it.
Mhm.
Now, what he says is true until such time as Austin rewrites the rules and they push that responsibility back on us. And it's been a fear of mine since the beginning. School districts is a $3 million, remember? So it's, yeah, no, but it affects your balance sheet and you agonize over it every time, but you can't do anything about it. As such time when the state decides that it is the responsibility, then you're going to scramble and figure out how to make that happen.
And the delta that you talked about from, like, if you're looking at 2020 and 2021 right here, where it says 602 and then 810 respectively, in last year's cycle, last year's audit report, because I got it for reference, because I haven't looked at it here, was 634 and it went down to 602. So again, it's a number that we don't control. He doesn't, he just reports on it. So.
And it's a number that's provided to you.
That's exactly right.
Absolutely.
Now, if I got one more question on that page, it is professional services. That would appear to me to be largely legal expenses, but because it's on this page where we can't control, do I have a bad assumption there?
No, I was going to say, I think the large part of that is exactly what you're indicating.
Which is something that we can do something about if we.
Yes, and I actually have in a short time here, I will go over the professional services, give you a breakdown.
Yeah, go ahead.
And show you the meeting.
Well, let me not jump you ahead if you haven't already to be
No,
prepared.
that's okay, I'll go ahead, let me just find it here real quick and I can go through it with you.
And just
It's
back,
page 38, it's page 38.
Oh, is it on there?
back to your pension liability, is that not what's represented in 33? On page 33? We spent a lot of time in the past looking at this and it fluctuates greatly and scares you some years and makes you feel real good in other
Right,
years.
that's exactly.
But this is what is representative of what is fluctuating that personnel services number, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
So if you look at the bottom of page
Okay.
38, you can see the professional services breakdown. On the very last page at the bottom, and you're talking about that large increase, 165 compared to 99.
So, yeah,
That is the breakdown. Those are all costs that you can control. Those are just costs that you incurred. Not everything is a governmental adjustment. When you see the government, I know it can be hard to understand, but not everything is adjusted for that. And these were one of them that was not. So you can see your breakdown of legal services compared to last year, the audit and bookkeeping, board of review expenses, and valuation appraisal fee differences.
and I can answer each one of those. Legal services, we've talked about this like for over a year, that we have more legislation coming on board all the time. We have more lawsuits than we've ever had. When you go down to board of review expense, we had more protests than we've ever had last year.
Then we also raised the fees that those people.
Yes,
Correct.
we went from $75 to $100 a day. Is that right? $100 a day. To come in line with the rest of what most people are doing around the state. That's a difficult job. So,
I wouldn't.
the last one is valuation of appraisal fees. There was a couple of new things that came on board this last year, this between 20 and 21, and that was ag valuations. Remember, Pritchard and Abbott's doing an ag valuation. Pritchard and Abbott is also doing some of our industrial, some of these specific things have changed industrial in nature, and they're doing these large industrial locations for us. And there's two other things that go with professional services. One had to do with the SB2 postcard and website maintenance. It's all required by, it was all required by legislation.
So is that last line valuation and appraisal fees that type of?
I don't know.
Use on this. We were discussing it.
I think it's and.
And
That maybe. Yeah, last year's things that and appraisal fees. So, sorry about that.
May I ask a question? According, when I read the state statutes, you only have to appraise every property once every 3 years. Is that correct? Only legally required to
You're required to
assess of each property once every 3
you
years.
appraise every property every year.
But
You're only required to check a third of the property every year. And then you're to apply, like you can analyze these third and this third and this third. For bigger districts, they do that all the time. Yeah.
okay.
But you're required to appraise the entire universe of properties. So you would take the third and analyze that. And if you miss the other 2/3 and miss new construction in that, that's on you as the appraisal district. And so.
So your property, if I'm correct, you're saying that your property will be assessed each year, even if it is not checked each year.
Yeah.
Okay.
So how does the state do it?
The state grades you on the whole. That's why we do the whole.
Right, so you're saying that you do the full 3/3,
I-
the whole
I
thing, you
do-
analyze
I
all of
do
it
all
every year.
29,000 parcels every year.
it is self-preservation.
It is well, no, it's in everybody's best interest that I'm as accurate as can be, because accuracy breeds equity. By the very nature of the mass of properties that you inspect, you find congruencies, you find similarities, and you're able to, appraise people in a more equitable fashion. So, in answer to your question, Jeff, yes, there's some people that do it the other way. I can't speak to their veracity, or accuracy.
Okay, well, Jeff, as much as I admire you asking good and intelligent questions. Let's write them down and next meeting we'll address them, or I'll address them outside for you. That's okay.
Okay, good.
Yes.
Move forward, okay. So we had gotten through on page number 7, we got through committed fund balance. We talked about the operating budget moving. I just wanted to briefly highlight at the bottom of page 7 on unassigned fund balance, which we had briefly talked about. That unassigned, it represents amounts which are unconstrained, and that they may be spent for any purpose. And so just as that came up, that was a $95,000 number in your initial, on my financial highlights, the unassigned was 95,000. So I just wanted to address that with you. Turning over to page number 8. When we look at the budget versus actual on the general fund, the revenues were in line, and that pretty much makes sense because you have a taxing balance that you're assigning your revenues. You had some other revenues, but your expenditures also went up about 60,000. So your change in fund balance actually was a decrease of 26,000 compared to your budget. Looking at last year, just so you have an idea what it looked like last year, your actual was 146,000 over compared to the $26,000 decrease this year. And just to point out, at the end of 21, your investment in capital assets was 616,000, which is net accumulated depreciation. And over at the top of page 9, you can see that breakdown for that 616,000. Really, the only point to note here, major change, your accumulated depreciation was $44,000. So that's your big depreciation, getting you down to 616,000. As far as some long-term debt, that's part of the net pension liabilities. Those again are things that are recorded. You can see additions of some of that liability of 86,000, getting you to a net pension liability increase of 311, which again flows back to the conversation we've already started, just part of it. Over on page 10, just real quickly, looking at economic factors. Just to point out, your 2022 budget is $1,097,000. Your 2021 budget was $1,049,000. Just so you're aware of the differences in the 2 years. Not much else to talk about. If we go over to page number 11, when we talk about general fund and we talk about adjustments, this is where you're going to start to, those adjustment columns where you're going to start to see a lot of this pension liability stuff really start to kick out. So when we look at it, we really try to focus on the general fund column, the very first column on the statement of net assets, because that's again what you can control. Cash overall, your capital assets, nothing really changed drastically there. Liabilities, last year's accounts payable was 36,000. This year's 2,800. That doesn't necessarily mean anything. That could just have been the way dates fell when you cut your checks, things such as that. There's nothing there. And then again, the fund balances, as you'll see, are broke down. We into non-spendable, unassigned, and committed. And we did discuss both unassigned and the committed fund balances, just so you had an idea of what those were. Going over to page number 12. The only real highlight here I saw that kind of looked something different would have been interest income. Interest income for the year was in 2021 was 13,800. It come down this year into prior year this year was 1,511. So it did have a drop off. Lots of different reasons that could be, not overly material in the aspect of things, but I just didn't want to point that out to you.
Well, the only interest income we have is on the checking account disparities in that.
Yes.
So just be a reduction in rates or the moment average cash balances.
The reduction in rates was primarily and we got that in the middle of the year. We got a notification, I want to say. I don't remember what it was, but we did get a notification.
All right, so if we will now kind of move forward from that over to page number 19. in the middle of the page there, you'll see where we talked about the compensated absences. And you'll see here, the beginning balance, the beginning of the year was $42,707. There were additions of $1,481 calculated out, and your ending balance was $44,188. I know those numbers are fairly small, and it doesn't mean that you had $1,400 worth of increased vacation or sick time or anything such as that. It's important to remember that and last year did have yearly changes in rates, which also will affect those numbers. Okay, it could be the exact same days, still could go up. Just wanted to point that out. Moving over to page number 25. I just want to, for anybody who doesn't know or isn't aware, just wanted to go over at the very top of the page about your cash deposits. Your now demand deposit is what we call it. Your carrying value, which is your book value, is $988,000. Your bank balance was $1,030,000. For those of you who may not be aware or whatever, of course, everybody knows that FDIC insurance covers $250,000. You might think you have a credit risk if your balance is $1 million. But it's important to note that you guys have a deal where your securities pledged is $1.8 million. So you're actually secured for $2 million at the bank rather than just the $250,000. So you shouldn't be concerned that your $1,030,000 is over the FDIC coverage because you are protected in that respect. And capital assets we've already discussed in prior pages. So moving over to page number 32, a lot of these notes, we can go into further detail on them as far as retention liabilities and stuff go, but we can talk a little more about that coming up. Page 32 is part of the supplementary information. These are not considered part of your original audited financials. So we have the general fund. Now as we're getting back to just normal operating accounts outside of the governmental adjustments. So now you can really see what your numbers look like and how you did. We have a budget column, and the first column is what you budgeted to do when the year started, and you have an actual column, and then you have a difference. Just a couple of the highlights there. Supplies and operating expenses went up. You have travel expenses that you had not budgeted, and your capital outlay was down. I think I'm trying to remember what you bought. I think it was something fairly minor, furniture, fixtures, something very small. But ultimately, when you look at the actual column, and you look at your fund balance on January 1, it was $788,000. You look at your fund balance December 31, $762,000. That is the $26,000 decrease that we've been discussing. And
What's
that's
the principal ingredient in the miscellaneous income on the actual?
What's the principal ingredient?
Well, you got 6,000 that you budgeted for, but yet we had a multiple of 8 times that.
Don't know.
Well, it's positive, so I'm happy, but just
I don't have a breakdown.
$41,000 to the good.
Lemonade stand or?
No, I'm wondering, I know that the tax office pays for a portion of our tax, and that represents about 27,000. But I don't.
But
think
you wouldn't have
that's-
budgeted
Not-
6,000 at 26. It's gotta be something else. It's not important because it's positive, but if you would, send out an email and say this is what principal ingredients are.
I'll try to track that.
Majors in there.
All right. Oh. Is it not budgeted 6 that we got in 21? But we sold the lot in 20 though, didn't we?
You sold the Church Street lot
In 20.
Okay.
I can get you that information. It's
Just so we know.
You received insurance proceeds for the
Insurance
flood.
proceeds from the flood.
Would have been miscellaneous.
In July.
Was that last? Yeah, would have been last year.
That would be part of that number.
Yeah. It doesn't, it's not that. That's a good portion of it, yeah.
It's a good portion of it.
Yeah.
I would bet.
Okay.
I don't want that one.
It was not the limiting stand.
was gonna say, I don't wanna do that.
Okay, so, going back to page 33, where we kind of had gotten to, and again, this information is provided to us from an outside source. This is not something you control. This is not something we control. These are simply reporting on the information that is provided to us. These are, again, a lot of movements, a lot of different, highs and lows. If you look across the 6-year span, you try to look at it and you try to come up with some rhyme or reason. I'm just gonna put you to the bottom line and tell you that look at it as a percentage of covered payroll. And if you could find a rhyme or reason how it went from 96% to 71% to 41% to 102%, 52%, that kind of gives you the ideal that we follow, that they're doing what they want. Okay, we just report it. I can't tell you why. There's so many moving parts. I don't even think it has to do with your moving parts. I think it's just statewide moving parts.
We have actually had them come to meetings and explain before, and you're welcome to have them back and see if you can figure out why.
Yeah,
This used to not be reported as part of the audited financials. There was a change years ago where this had to be a part of the audit financials, which was good because it brought it to the board's attention. And I know that we immediately had them come down and explain what it was. It's been years ago. We probably could do it again, but I'm not sure it yields much because there's really not much you could do to affect the end result. You can contribute more is what you can do. But as we've seen from these numbers, that doesn't always yield. They're doing what they want to do. So I'm not sure that's a good move in hindsight.
And when they did change is when we came into the supplemental information of breaking out and giving you your operating and supplemental information, because really, if you look at the governmental activities and net assets, all this is included and is outside of your scope. And so we give you these other numbers just to kind of help you see where you truly are. When you look at your contributions on page number 34, we can at least say that when you look at contributions as percentage of covered payroll, those numbers have definitely leveled. Okay, 2016, interesting year, it's had a lot of activity, but if you look at the last 5 years, they've been hovering right at the 20% mark. Okay, so that is stabilized in that respect. That is stabilized, and also the employees portion currently is set as well at the 7%.
Okay, we're still on page 33 for a moment.
We can.
I think I know, but for those that are not familiar with this, speak on the year 2016, where the
Contributions by employer.
yes, thank you.
Um,
They doubled in 2016 and
I don't know for a fact, but I seem to remember, Travis, that was the year that we took the unassigned funds and we made it, the board made a big influx into the contributions. Does that seem familiar to you?
It probably is.
I think that's what it is. They just took the unassigned funds and tried to pay down like future obligations from a pension standpoint.
I don't want to do it today, but I want this board to have an education in what the real liability is, not only to the appraisal district, but to the entities who pay the appraisal district's bills with respect to the pension and the guaranteed earnings that employees have.
Yeah, I want you to drive, I
That
would encourage you to drive that conversation to get whomever you'd like.
Well, who did we know last time we had, who is this? I mean, who drives this? That is who we had come, because that is the conversation that was had before, was what is our true liability and our entity's liability, and they came down and explained it. And it sounded like, if I remember, well, we need to have it explained again, but
Texas Retirement, TCDRS is who it was.
so we can have them come again.
Sure, absolutely.
And that's exactly the kind of question. If in fact we don't
Terry,
have,
you need to make sure, write that down.
if we in fact don't have liability for the increase in pension liability, then why did we double our contribution in that 1 year? Did the law change after that?
I think it was, again, I don't remember, but I think we had a similar conversation about that time. We were still in the old building and Kevin was the chief at that time. And I want to say that there was some delta that the board wanted to address to say, hey, we need to be better funded for future. And there was a person that came down from TCDRS to explain it. And that board made an action that year. And that's the best way I remember it without looking at the document.
But you see why I want to ask that question?
Absolutely.
If we don't have responsibility, why do we do it?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, we don't have control. The question is, do we have responsibility?
Well, I think it would be hard to lock down responsibility when it moves with such extremes. I mean, if it was a gradual 2%, 3% a year, I think you can log in there and say that's gonna be my liability. I think when you look at the changes from year to year, it would be hard to say, maybe that's worst case scenario. It's kind of what we've always been thought of as that, you know what, if everything's shuttered, that may be where you're at today. But this is also 2021 December. I mean, that doesn't even mean that number's true today. Because of the fact of everything moving so quickly. It probably is to explain it to you guys. I mean, I do see the same thing in schools. We also have a school district. So you have a lot of these moving projections is what we describe it as.
Yeah, I remember some things that were said that were hopefully not accurate, but some statements about guaranteed rate of return and people who actually invest the money really have no responsibility for making sure it is a guaranteed rate of return. They just have the ability to come back and get the entities that pay our bills. I want to know that that's true or know that that's false.
Let's get some education.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll get them to be at one of the next 2 or 3 meetings. Is that okay?
Sure.
Okay.
I'm sorry, can we go back to page 32? I didn't mean to. Okay, so supplies and operating expenses go from budgeted was 215 to 271 with 55,000 difference. What is that? Supplies, I mean, is that the employee too in that operating?
No, that's personnel services. It's just the employee.
Okay, so
Supplies and operating expenses. I can tell you one of the things is we had the flood and we had added expenses that were done just by doing the move over here. Some of that was accounted for by the insurance, but then also there was the SB2 law that went into effect that may be part of that.
I want to say there was a recoupment of funds that happened of about 26,000. You had to pay something back.
Yes.
And that's going to be a portion of that number.
Have we had to write that check yet?
We did write that check.
Really?
because it's already.
Yeah.
FEMA, we're talking about FEMA payment?
FEMA.
Yeah.
They came and
FEMA
asked
funded
for
us
it.
some things and determined after the fact that we weren't entitled to it.
They came and asked for it.
Yeah.
Ah,
We accrued it, or that's correct language. We acknowledge it on the balance sheet as we may get asked to pay this back.
One of the 3. One of the, remember there was.
yeah,
Again,
no, not
without
exactly,
going
but
back,
yes.
but they asked for 3 different things and we paid 2 of the 3. And we wrote checks back to FEMA, basically. And it wasn't to FEMA, it was to Texas, the Texas arm of the FEMA people. I'd have to
Usually funded to the Texas on Tito, probably.
But basically they gave us money and said, we'd like that back.
And so that would have gone right. We get that a lot.
Which is why the school district didn't want anything to do with FEMA.
Exactly. I
But
would
then come
not
back up to 10
recommend.
years later.
Mhm. No, I would not recommend any of that. So then the 26 would come out of that 55.
Correct.
Okay. And then on professionals, the travel, so there was 0 budgeted, but then it was 22,000 actual.
Yeah, I don't know how the 0 was budgeted, because I do know that we always have a budgeted amount in our budget.
Well, I read at one point talking about the previous year because of COVID, there was no travel because of COVID or whatever, but at that point.
But if you look at, this is schedule of expenses. But we absolutely had travel. And we have travel in our budget, so I don't know where the zero is coming from, actually, Jeff.
I can look. Maybe,
Because every year we have travel as one of our line items. And we do have travel.
I mean, you
every
know
year.
it's gonna happen.
Well, no, I mean, but part of our travel expenses, we run the county. I
Yeah,
mean,
so that's what I'm saying, you know it's gonna happen, so I don't know what the,
I'll
So
check into
the
it.
question is the report accurate or did we just not budget it?
Yeah.
Reflect it, so
We absolutely budgeted it for 21.
then we're saying that the audit's not correct.
Well, so I'm just saying.
basically is what.
I'm
This
saying,
report might, I'm not, until I look at it, I won't know, but I mean, the audit in of itself is not out. This is just comparison to your actual budget, so I can get that information to find out. I agree, it looks odd, but we felt that was right based on something, so
Okay.
I'll find out.
yeah, and to Jeff's point, I mean, he gives me a copy of this. It's 30 some odd pages of financial stuff, and I'm required to look at it and say, yeah, that looks good. So to his point, I signed the thing that said it looked good. So until this was pointed out, yeah, this looks to be odd. So we will,
Odd.
We'll get it,
we'll check into it.
And then finally, just to wrap up on page 37, just an audit report on the additional information. Since we initially disclosed in the auditor's report that the audit was simply based on the financial statements as they were prepared. This is an independent auditor's report on the additional information to tell you that we also believe it's presented fairly in all material respects in relation to the financial statements as a whole. Disclosure on the zero travel budget, but I want to get you information on that, but other than that.
It doesn't change the nature of the audit.
No.
It's an unqualified opinion. And we just need to know what happened there. Did we give him something inaccurate or?
It's possible, but it's possible, but again, I don't know. We'll look into it. I'll look into it. He'll look into it.
So my question, I guess, is this, because the next move would be to approve the audit move from draft form to adopted. But do we want to wait until we have those answers or subject
Absolutely. If you
to?
want to table it until you have an answer, you're welcome to do so.
We were only discussing the one number, the issue.
That's the only thing that I have an unsolved question, I guess, at the moment.
Okay.
Is let's
Yeah, we
just be
can-
sure that we represent that correctly. That is, we gave it to him incorrectly, and so it's got to stay that way because we gave it that way.
Well, not only, and this is, I'll say it again, he gave me a copy of this entire document. I missed this part. So,
That's why we have that many sets of eyes looking at it.
again, just,
Okay. Anybody feel differently about waiting till we have that answer?
No.
It's not insignificant. I mean, we don't have the budgets that the county and city and the school district do, but Joe, we ought to have some confidence in it.
absolutely.
Okay.
We'll get a meeting scheduled pretty quickly in the future.
Then, since there's not an action, we don't need the motion to do anything except we'll bring it back when that question is answered. And we're well ahead of everybody else in the audit procedure world in this county anyway, so.
Yes.
We're working on it.
Get you an answer.
And is it okay, just if he writes something, if we find whatever that is, he writes something and I present it, and he doesn't need to be here at the next meeting?
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay, 'cause I know.
We're paying for him to be here. We're paying for- And I think that does it. Like, we recognize it's not significant, but let's just solve it and move on.
Fine.
Absolutely.
Well, we'd like our report to be as
Yeah,
right as
accurate.
everybody
I
else.
was.
Yes, and we'll fix the D on the end as well.
Oh,
Yes, just to make sure. that-
I have a bad habit of reading what's supposed to be there or read anomalies. Okay, we're going to item number 6. Budget amendment, transfer unassigned funds to building repair and renovation.
So in the audit report, and I'll ask a general question, would the unassigned funds number change if the travel budget number changed from 0 to some number?
The unassigned fund balance won't change.
The unassigned fund
The
balance.
fund balance is actually a reporting of where you're at today.
Yeah,
Total
so
balance.
so just the way I read it, the fund, this is on page 3. The fund balance of the district in fiscal 21 year totaled 762,251. Of this amount, 900 or 95,845 is unassigned and may be used to meet the district's ongoing obligations to the property owners and creditors, property owners and creditors. In years past, this board has put that towards the hurricane rebuild. You know that we're in the midst of one right now, and you know that only took part of the interior portion. There's the the painting, the waterproofing, the climatization of the storage facility that's going to happen in this future year cycle. And it's my recommendation that we take this unassigned fund balance and put it and mark it for that. But again, that's your call.
If it's your pleasure, I need a motion to that.
Well, it sounds reasonable to use that methodology. I think that motion.
Is there a second? Is there not a second?
Guys would like to see.
Okay. No, the chairman can second motion.
Yeah, what, go.
I'll second it.
Okay.
Now we're in
that's fine.
discussion.
There you go.
Yes,
All right,
thank
okay.
you.
We're transferring, is that what this is right here? This,
That's the second.
yes, we're transferring unassigned funds to our repair fund.
Yeah, and we're modifying the resolution reads that you're modifying the 22 budget. And you're telling the entities that they're not gonna have to do anything. It's not effective. They're not gonna have to give us money. A lot of the times when people do a budget resolution, that they're saying, hey, we need some more money. We're not telling them that. We're saying that we have an excess of funds that we'd like to push over into this category. We're giving you notice, and the entities get to say no.
Understood, and so you probably said it and I missed it as I was reading the materials. And we're doing this, why?
Okay, so what we're doing right now as far as the repair is
Yeah.
the interior so that we can move
Right.
back into the property.
Right.
We're taking the 95,000 in preparation for the next phase, which is the exterior painting, the waterproofing on the bottom 1.5 foot that we talked about, the waterproofing of the doors, the climatization of this area right over here so that we can get the storage facility, the long-term documents that we've had since Harvey and move them back into this facility. Those types of things. And we don't know that it's gonna, my suspicion is it's not going to reach $95,000. But we won't know until we do that. If we have the funds ready, we can actually start to do that as soon as we finish this one. They can actually do it while we're inside this process.
So to be clear, the things you're talking about are not part of the project we're doing here and not an overage of that project. We did not go over on that project and are needing extra funds to finish it. This is funds to do the parts that we had not planned to do and what we had available here, right?
That is correct.
What we bid out and whatever we're doing here, we're still on budget and still on
We're still
schedule.
on budget with the exception of something. I'm gonna-
I understand, but for the overall, we're still on budget on that project.
correct.
This is not to cover overages that we missed there. I'm
Yeah.
not saying that's not okay if it is, but I want to understand what we're taking on assigned funds
That is
for.
correct. What you indicated is correct. We had 331 roughly is our, what this project cost. We had 390 something thousand to allocate to that. But we did not take on the second phase because we didn't know how much the second phase was going to cost, but we wanted to proceed with this. So the 95 that's in front of you today is not an overage that we're taking care of here.
So, okay, is it appropriate? I'm sorry if I'm being dense. Is it appropriate to take the 95 unassigned for unspecified projects going forward? Because we don't have a clear scope of work for what we're going to do going forward. It's kind of ambiguous. I know that there was discussion of waterproofing. We said we'll push to a later date. I didn't know we weren't going to paint, but if we weren't painting the building, then so be it. And then climatization, I don't know what that means.
You're basically taking this, this building right here and you put an air conditioned and dehumidifier in it so that you can do long-term paper storage of records that are currently in Victoria, Texas.
So my question would be, would we be able to table that for right now and you get
Absolutely.
quotes? Because I'm with Travis in the sense of, I
Absolutely.
mean, if you put 95,000 and you only need 40,000, then you're gonna have to pull out. To me, it's putting the cart before the horse and
You're
some
gonna have to
aspect.
pull out in what way?
Well, I'm just saying, if you designated it for Harvey
Mhm.
and you only needed 40 of that, then you've got 55 sitting there that you have to move, you have to reallocate it or
Right,
designate it
and I'm
somewhere
sorry,
else.
I was working on the premise of the last conversation that we had when we walked through and said that we wanted to do that. And then we wanted the backup generator, we wanted to climatize this, and everybody was all thumbs up at that
I
time.
think we are, and I think we,
Okay,
should.
good.
I think we
Yes, but
still, we
it's-
still are, but it's the. Do you take the money unassigned and then go get specific later and then give back what you don't spend? I think that I agree with Michaela, it feels a little bit tail wagging the dog. Do we figure out what we're doing exactly? I know we had a conversation in general about it, but there was no specifics over
No,
what we're gonna
absolutely
do.
not.
And should we not put that together first and then figure out how to?
But if we don't have if you have, I guess you can have unassigned funds hanging out there for a while, I mean, for an entire year, I guess. Okay, so then the answer to your question is yes, you can have the unassigned funds remain unassigned. And then when I have a good scope of what that looks like, then you take that plus 120%, and then you have a good, a good idea of what we're gonna spend on that next phase. Does that sound reasonable?
I think he acted on what we gave him the impression of, is let's be prepared.
We
to do
did, and
that.
I think we did say, we have no generator for this building. We have no way to keep us going to the storm happening again. We would be at the, or any event like that, which is good practice. And we did talk about being able to actually utilize the building back here. Where are our records now?
They're in Victoria, Texas.
We want to bring them back. I mean, there was purpose to it. And if we do not use the entirety of those funds,
We can absolutely give it back to the entities. The board would make that rule.
That was what I was gonna say. If we have unassigned funds and we literally have no plan for it, then the entities that pay us our operating expenses have a call on us giving it back to them.
so what
And
is your?
we want to be proper in either event.
I agree, and I kind of wait for Michaela to come back, because you're gonna go to the entities and pitch to, there she is.
Sorry.
So, no problem. So, sorry, Mike, but you repeat everything that you just said. No.
Yes.
Sorry.
The appropriateness, so number one, it is, and I asked
Okay.
you and Mike, it is appropriate that we keep unassigned funds, even though the scope of work is not exact, correct?
You can.
And you're doing that based upon the conversation we had last meeting about the need to generate, the need to climatize, the need to rest, and the remainder would in fact be able to go back to the entities if it was not used in its entirety. We just don't have a clear scope of work as to what we're going to do. And so you will have to go to the entities to pitch this unassigned, that we're keeping this unassigned for a purpose. You just tell them we're keeping it and see if they ask questions.
Well, this board, you have unassigned funds that you can do nothing with for the moment.
We're amending a budget, correct? A budget that we've already
A
approved,
budget for 2022
that we've already approved,
that you've already
and we're
approved.
gonna be amending it. You're gonna send the amendment to the entities.
I was
There are
gonna say,
letters in here.
Yes, I saw that. And should the entities inquire as to what we're needing the unassigned
Then-
funds for,
then it's
your
the-
answer would be,
the second phase of the waterproofing of the district and the climatizing and the generator. And then the question would be, well, is it 95,500, whatever? And the answer is, we don't know. We haven't gotten that bid. But let's say, two scenarios. Let's say it's 60,000. So then you have 60,000, then you have 35 roughly that you can, at some point, this board can disperse back amongst the entities. Or the second thing is that it's 160,000, in which case we're gonna be asking for more. So what's the better course? I was just trying to be proactive. You can absolutely do either.
I know you're refreshing my memory. I appreciate that. I remember the conversations and was climatation, and I assume what you mean by the building is flood prevention, right?
That's correct.
Okay, and that was discussed
Waterproofing.
not just in the previous meeting, but in the initial talks of this whole project that was brought up. It just couldn't be fit into the budget for this project.
Without this 95 that we now have in front of us, because we were talking, the previous first conversations happened in the fall of 21, which we didn't know this number until now.
I understand. And we talked about not trying to survive the great flood, but we wanted to be able to survive a bad rain and not have to redo this every time that we have one.
Exactly. So you can absolutely not do anything with it today. You can just let this set, and then we can, if you want to, encourage me to get along with, again, get back with Dykema and see what the next phase would look like, do that whole bid process before you assign the funds, we can absolutely do that. I mean, it's not a problem. I was, again, in hopes of being proactive per our last conversation.
Well, it doesn't end anything.
No,
It
absolutely
just
not.
stays where it's at, and then if we decide that we want to spend that money, we get a number that's at least not greater than this, then we move it at the time.
And it's not time delay on anything either, because you're still gonna need to get the quotes no matter what, you know, and so
I
you
would.
would, so it's still like, it's not gonna hold your progress up, their progress up. I mean, you're more than welcome to get the quotes now. Then if we have to have a special meeting to approve the audit, and then you get the quotes back in that time, then we can re-meet.
Yeah, I mean,
So
we're talking
we're
about,
not holding you up and, or them up.
you just need to know that, first and foremost, in about 2 weeks, 3 weeks, my whole life, the
Yes.
district's life's gonna change. And we're not gonna be responsive to anything except property owners and their appeals.
Correct.
And that's gonna go all the way through September 1st. And then we're going to be able to talk about things again. So,
Well, we did have a flood in what, July or August
Yeah, in July.
last year. So do you want to designate, say, a portion of that and say $40,000 to get the flooding or the largest priority
you can do that. You can.
going
scratch
to
into that
where
number.
it,
You can make a number.
or do you just want to wait?
You haven't, in that suggestion, you've actually made the fogginess of it worse. You've
Which I
got-
do
You've
great.
got a you've got a
That was my
dollar amount.
hesitance. Yeah,
Yes.
You
I
know,
think we either do it
Either
or
put
we
it all,
don't.
Okay.
but none of it until we know.
Okay.
If we do none of it,
It
what
it only,
happens to
it
the
only
monies?
delays us a couple of weeks from the standpoint that I have to plan a meeting and then it pushes out the whole 30 days from the date of that time.
what happens with the unassigned funds if we do nothing at the meeting today?
They
Nothing.
just
They
stay
just stay right
aside.
there. They can't
And they
use
just
it.
accrue, they just basically, if we're at this place next year.
Yep.
It's the unassigned plus the unassigned. And then the entities go, what about all that money that's unassigned? Shouldn't you be giving that money back?
I may be crazy. I may be the only one. I feel better getting more concrete on those specific
Absolutely.
things that we're gonna
We
do
can do
and
that.
then assigning the funds for the specific things we all
The
agree to do.
delay, like the question posed, the delay is about 6 weeks. And the reason I say 6 weeks is because it takes about 2 weeks for us to put a meeting together. And then it takes a month from the day you sign it.
But we're gonna have to come back together to talk about exactly what it is we're gonna do to
Anyway.
climatize that building and all the
Yeah,
rest of it
for sure.
anyway, because there was not I know that they had talked about a berm with a gate, and I don't know if that was set in stone with the only way to go, or if we were gonna discuss
Yeah.
alternatives and things of that nature, paint and plug the holes.
Yeah, since that time, Dyke was talked about replacing the whole front window so that it's hurricane proof. And then doing the berm at the very bottom
Yeah,
and then at the back. He talked about the waterproofing, doing all the weep holes and the
Yes.
waterproofing the first 1.5 feet.
I find that all critical. I would love for them to bring us a proposal and a budget and us approve what they're gonna do and
Sounds
move the
great.
funds. But I think it's time is of the essence. I think that it needs to be done. I hate spending the money we have and leaving weep holes open and not addressing it minimum weep holes. But I think that I would feel more comfortable if we had something from them showing us what they're gonna do and what we're gonna spend money on.
Absolutely, you can table this, or I don't even know what the
Table it.
proper,
Well, what we have is a motion, and a second, we're in discussion, so what we need now is a motion to table it in a second to do so. There, you want to table it, or you can push on somebody else?
I'm willing to withdraw my motion.
In that case,
I'll motion to table.
okay, I'll second that. All in favor of tabling this until we have a better idea? Any?
Aye.
Aye?
Aye.
Okay. Boy, the horse died on that one.
Right?
it's good, it's all good discussion. I don't mind either way. Again, you just need to know that my thing is, I'm trying to be proactive because I know how busy I'm gonna get in very short.
I don't mind the direction you went. I just would feel better if we did it.
Sure.
That way.
Absolutely.
We proved, if nothing else, that our memory of 30 to 45 days ago collectively was not particularly good.
It needs refreshing.
Okay, Chief Appraiser's report.
On the chief appraiser's report, the very first thing is the supplemental appraisal roll presentation. It's on your tablet, the very first, probably just click the button and swipe up, I think is what you have to do.
Yeah, that never worked for me.
I know, that's why
I'm not gonna
I'm
embarrass
touching
myself. I got a camera watching right there.
Press the side button,
The side
On
button,
that
there's two side buttons.
press one at the top one.
Thank you very much.
Top one is.
Or you can just start pressing buttons and see what pops up.
It's not responding.
Start tapping.
Oh, wait a minute. there's two
You're
more.
probably upside down.
No, turn the silver button,
Yeah, that's it.
turn back.
Just
We need to
jiggle
be next to each other.
Just jiggle it.
Okay, tell me
We were
what.
the first time.
First
Supplement.
supplement, that's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, you got, probably double tap it the first time, it's gonna load it.
Mine went straight to the supplement, it's not there. Oh, here it is, first quarter.
Mhm.
I'm not sure most computers will do it. Supplemental. Okay, Michael. Fire
Okay,
away.
on the supplemental report, all that you need to see is just the groups that are there that's indicated. In looking at the tax code again, the thing that I have to present to you is the changes that decrease tax liability. The appropriate account numbers are there, the years that are changed are represented, and the supplemental group code, which is 2525 Bravo. That's a section of the code that we talked about, a certified roll, and I'm able to unroll it and do a change, and this is what's going on. So that's all you have.
And this is one I was explaining to you about when we talked about taking the job on. He gives us this report, you read it, you're not responsible to do anything about it, you can't do anything if you want to.
Can't do anything if you wanted to.
Moving on to financials, since the last time we met, we don't have anything of substance. I don't have my bookkeeper with me today. And we met a relatively short period ago, I think it was 6 weeks ago or something like that, it was in February, so.
Since the last meeting, I did find out that the software that produces the budget and the cash flow does have a balance sheet. So we will, when we start having that full presentation, we will have a balance sheet so we can follow accordingly and not just do it.
Yeah, and Jack and Josie were able to meet and talk about that a little bit, so. The next item on the list is the building renovation update. If you go back to your thing, if you'll look at the looks like the expenses spent on renovation PDF, I believe it is.
You can't ever miss another meeting.
This is not, is the 166?
Oh, brown.
This is not
Yeah,
the
I
right
think we
one.
should have a paper one, right, yeah.
Is
Is
there,
there a paper one?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay.
do you have
Here's
the,
the paper.
sorry about this, guys, it's the updated Hurricane Harvey expenses, is what it, that's the list of it, but really this is the building report. We have spent, you'll remember that the award was for 339,000, 339, 331. One of those two. We've spent 258, which represents 76% of that. Now, where are we at on the building? We've got drywall in, we've got the counters in, we've got the electrical, the lighting, the ceiling tiles, the majority of the ceiling tiles in. Next week, we have the flooring that's going in. After the flooring, the plumbing fixtures will go in. The windows have been made, the renovation, like the old safe was removed, the brickwork's been done. The cabling, which was not part of the original scope, which is one of the other addendums. The cabling is absolutely required. It's all the wiring for the data that's required in that building. That's in there. I think the bid was 17,000 and was absolutely required. I had Colin, which is the IT department head, help me with getting a contractor to do that. In fact, they're over there right now pulling wire through our data room right now, putting it through the server rack so that when the day is, when we do that move, we take this data and we pull it over there. We put those server components over there and do that. We are scheduled right now to move back on April 29th. So approximately 2.5 weeks prior to their construction completion date. So they're ahead of schedule. And so we're really pleased with that.
The 339 that we approved, was that inclusive of ICMA? I thought the ICMA was done separately and then the 339 was for the project.
No,
Because you
Dykema
have that all in, we have Dykema and project in this number here.
was by himself. 339 was just the contract.
Okay, so this 258 is towards 339 plus whatever Dykema's number was,
Yeah,
correct?
Dykema's
Okay,
number was 20 something
so
thousand.
it's probably 258 towards
It was
360 or something.
Yeah,
Okay,
that's right.
I just want to be clear. Okay, and the
Yeah.
change orders
Yeah,
have been the wiring, the cabling, that was necessary. The safe removal, which I heard was impressive.
yes.
Um,
Safe removal, the wiring, there was one other item,
Moving?
the moving, like that had to be part of this. I put it as part of this was we had items that were in this room. And Texas Modular is also in here.
yes.
You wanted that to be a part of this as well. I say part of this, it's not part of the.
I don't
bid
care
package.
as long as we're comparing not to the 339, but to whatever the total number should be, because that
Yeah.
would make us look like we're a lot closer to completion money wise than we are
Yeah.
physically. So I was just making that clarification.
Texas Modular is on here, so, I wanted you to have a clear understanding of how much. we
That's
spent.
great. That's perfect.
We also have I've contacted Texas Modular that the pickup date for these 3 trailers, the triple wide is going to be May 5th. Again, we're on schedule to get back in there.
So you hope to be in there and able to operate by May 5th so that they can pick your buildings up.
Yeah, we're planning to move on
I
the
like the
29th.
assumptive close.
Yeah.
We got this.
We're planning to move.
I think they're all excited, so I don't think you'll have to worry about that.
I'm not,
Say you're
as long as it's
fine.
ready, I'm not worried. If we come by and they're working in the parking lot, we know that we missed.
Yeah, the thing is,
Get your stomach down, we're right.
I'm trying to, I don't want to pay extra on this if I don't have to, but the main thing is
I
I've
agree.
been reassured 3 or 4 different times that the 29th is a good day.
That's great.
So, we're going to be,
You said it, squatter
That's right.
rights.
That's right.
for all essential purposes, we're going to be closed on the 29th because we're going to be moving things back over. We're not going to be able to help the public very much at all.
Do you
And
have
they-
a date when you're possibly gonna be shutting down to move network? I need to know
Yes,
that.
yes, Colin is going to coordinate that, and he'll be in contact with both of us.
Okay, good.
But
Cause I
right,
need to let them know.
right now, they're running the fiber optic and the cable into that data room. So what should happen is we should be down for about,
It shouldn't take that
data wise,
long.
3 or 4 hours.
Yeah, I was
That's
gonna
it.
say it shouldn't take that long.
So that's what's going on with the building renovation update. I have to say, Progressive Structures is a model outfit. They handle stuff very well. They're on top of things. They have a guy that's there, out of every 10 days, he's there 8 or 7 days, in a 10-day period, overlooking the subs, really staying on top of things, and that's the reason that we're 2 to 3 weeks ahead of schedule. So, the last thing of report is I have 2 employees that are gonna be retiring in the next 2 years. And this is my first illustration to you that we need to think about replacing those individuals, and there will be some crossover as far as the time that those individuals need to be trained. What do I mean by that? My bookkeeper is she's our longest lasting employee. She's been here for 22 years. She's our oldest employee, and she's not our oldest person, but she's our oldest employee.
Let's clarify, longest tenure.
Longest tenured employee. And she has a lot of information that she needs to disseminate. Our longest tenured employee is going to be retired, not at the end of this December, but the end of next December.
Oh, good.
And so we've got 1 year to get with Jeff, and Jeff indicated like you need to get that person on board and learning how to do these things so that we can.
With what kind of lead time?
Well, my recommendation, just because we've seen in the past,
Yes.
is I think it's important, everybody to remember that there's certain things in accounting that don't happen once a year. And so if you don't bring somebody in a good time frame, they may never see something. And And it's hard for somebody who's been doing something for 20 years to sit there and make you a good list of everything that they do, because certain things they only do once a year. So you really want to have somebody, I mean, if you're talking turnkey at the end of the day, when she leaves and somebody's active, you need almost a year's time frame. So my recommendation was to not wait, because of the fact that you could be missing things right now that she won't see, or the new person won't see before their life.
Well, I know your firm worked and has worked with her hand in hand in order to produce what has generally been always a very good result. So that's something that we don't need to take for granted.
I'm gonna back his on that one. We had our bookkeeper retire end of March last year. And I had one of the girls that I knew I was putting up into her spot, start training with her almost a year before that.
How'd it go?
Just switch over. She still occasionally, once in a while, still messages her, the other bookkeeper, but she's doing phenomenal because we had her in there working through the things that she does once a year. And things like that, working, I mean, she was basically when I could not spare her from the front, I would have her back there working with her. So the switchover did very well. It's doing really well with her being in there for, there's, like I said, there's still times where she still is gonna find, have issues.
Even with the year.
Yeah, even with the year, she's still, but I know how to do the job, so it was all right.
Okay.
This leads to my, we're about to have a budget conversation for the 23 year in here in about 2 months. And so that's one of the conversations that I want to have again, because I want to bring somebody on so that they're there on January of 23, so they see a full year cycle before that person leaves, at least sees everything at least once. The other person is leaving at the end of this year. She's one of our front office staff members, and she's just retiring. And so I'm gonna have to bring somebody on in the latter part of this, the last quarter of this year to get, again, some overlap. We had a good transition with Karen and Don.
I was gonna say it would be more similar to the transition we had with Karen.
Yeah, it's gonna be the last.
I know we made adjustments
I would have
to our timelines,
On
but
that though, I would have to say, if like with, you had an issue with Donna, took a lot of December off because she had built up time,
Right.
which I'm sure did, and I've seen where it did pay a toll on Taryn coming in because she didn't get that full month of training with her.
Right.
So if that person's gonna do the same thing, you're gonna want to bring them in a little bit sooner.
That's why I said the last quarter of this year.
Yeah, because it's gonna be even tougher for her not to get the full training if that person's gone the last 3 weeks of using up all their vacation or whatever and not here. That's not training.
What's your method of recruiting? Are you gonna try and get somebody here?
Do I
Or
have
are
some?
you gonna recruit outside?
For
both positions?
Uh,
Or like her, she was fortunate to have somebody inside the organization that she could.
I have a
cross-train
couple
and move
of
up.
people, I have a couple of people on staff right now that have the capacity to do the bookkeeping. And there's a certain set of qualities that are conducive to financial
Yeah,
accrual.
see, where I had I was in on the hiring when we hired the girl that I knew I wanted. And I knew Jerry was gonna retire a year or so before. So when we had known, so we looked for a particular person to work the front counter that we knew would be, we knew years when the bookkeeper was gonna retire. She pretty much told us that this is the year she would be retiring. So we had an advantage. Me and Jerry looked for a certain person to bring in that we knew would work for bookkeeping. She had the experience. Plus they worked she worked the counter, so she learned. So he doesn't have that option where I did it. It was helpful.
Yeah. So it may be difficult to draw on that. I do have a couple of individuals that have some accounting background. And so, but they're not the one that would fill that role. So again, I'm just having this conversation early so that when I ask for a person early, hopefully this board is responsive to that. So
very good.
That's all we got. That's all I have.
Seeing nothing further, we will adjourn.
Let's
That's like.
You don't have to.
I know. I was gonna do it just for you.
Would you make a motion for that? Ed?
No, I don't want
I
to,
know.
I don't want to
I
set
make a
precedent.
motion that we have Travis stay in the rest of it.
Yeah, there
We
you
need to go out in the way we came in, so Travis. And the delay between, so you got about 20 minutes.
Come on, I was even on time.
Let me grab my charger before I forget. Now that it's, I've borrowed your electricity. Oh, no, I know, charge me.
Borrow.
No, it didn't even charge.
I did.
Ah, that's what a buck deal.
Thank you, yeah.
Maybe I'll get out. I only had one of them. Did you? Okay.
I know.
Thank you.
All right. Almost done. I gotta leave my pen as much as I want to take it.
Blake is in charge. Put Blake in charge. He's got the young ones coming up. I don't know if we did a table or if we did a check this year.
I don't know.
No.
Longest tenure. Longest tenure.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, yeah, I got a question for you.
Yeah.
I don't think it's a question that I
And
need.
you're ready, because I'm looking at,
I was asked.
should be 1035. And then depreciation is still gonna be the 332.
No, depreciation's, well, 375 accumulated.
Oh, okay, so yeah, that's what my formulas are, okay, yeah, so yeah, we're on the same page.
Okay.
I also saw it and made a note that it needs to be addressed. And I will get that budget, honestly, I can't speak as to what happened yet, but I will get you an answer on it, the zero trouble. And we'll know.
Next vacation tax rate is not rolled, it's not whatever number they have in their books, you know what I mean? It doesn't matter, it's whatever your number is, will be evaded. So the number that they gave didn't match, but it also could be yours. Their number may be today versus not what we have. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and there was two things when I looked at that. First of all.
Oh, well, we
first
want
of
it
all,
to be
I
right,
would
too, I mean, don't get me wrong,
I was never
Oh.
asked what I thought prior to the event. I never am. I'm always an afterthought, and nobody ever asked, like you have,
we did,
in fairness, for lack
we
of,
did try to
whatever
push
you
this
think
off
about my.
pretty quick, we were just here a week ago.
Oh, yeah.
You still
And
have
so we were
a-
like, let's get you a report so we can get you guys squared away.
You think it'd be important?
But
to ask one
I will get
question?
you those
Well,
updates.
that's what, it was so, that question was so far beyond my, and I don't even think it's appropriate because I don't think we're supposed to be entering discussions about specific
Yeah.
properties, period. But I wanted to,
Oh, the point is
pass
that
it on to you so that you could appropriately handle it.